The cabin pressure control system maintains a constant cabin pressure in the pressurized area of the fuselage by controlling cabin altitude and cabin altitude rate of change. The pressurized area includes the forward and aft baggage compartments, as well as the underfloor area. Input of air is from the air conditioning system. Release of air is controlled by modulating the outflow valve in the aft pressure bulkhead. There are also two safety outflow valves, one on the aft and one on the forward bulkhead. The cabin pressure controller, located in the flight deck ceiling, takes inputs from the power levers, the PSEU weight on wheel signals, pressure sensors, and pilot inputs of destination altitude. It controls the pressurization schedule by modulating the aft outflow valve. As the aircraft climbs, cabin pressure is scheduled to climb at a slower rate within this pressure envelope to maintain a normal pressure differential of up to 5.46 psi. The automatic pressurization schedule is programmed to approximately follow this curve. However, the auto schedule is affected by departure and landing field elevation above or below sea level. The maximum scheduled cabin altitude is 8,000 feet, and the cabin pressure warning light comes on at cabin altitudes above 9,800 feet. Controls on the overhead panel are very similar. On the right side panel is the guarded selector used to open the forward safety outflow valve in an emergency. Let's look more closely at the panels. Firstly, the pressurization control panel. This switch controls the aft outflow valve to set one of three modes. Dump. The aft outflow valve is opened, dumping cabin pressure. Manual. The cabin pressure controller is turned off. Auto. Cabin altitude is set according to a pre-programmed schedule by modulating the aft outflow valve. In the normal auto mode, you simply set landing field altitude before takeoff. With this knob, note that there are no controls for landing field QNH on this panel. Landing field QNH is set on the altimeter via the index control panels. In manual mode, you control cabin pressure with the manual differential switch by increasing cabin pressure, that is, decreasing cabin altitude, or decreasing pressure, that is, increasing cabin altitude. In manual mode, monitor the pressurization gauges carefully. The forward outflow rotary controls the position of the forward outflow valve. Normally closed in auto mode, it can be moved towards open to release pressure, that is, to increase cabin altitude, or back to closed to retain cabin pressure and decrease cabin altitude. So in manual mode, both of these switches have the same effect in the same direction. But the forward outflow selector reacts quicker and can be used for smoke evacuation of the flight deck. The dump position opens the aft outflow valve to give ram air ventilation and is used to release overpressure on ground to clear smoke from the cabin or for unpressurized flights. You can also open the forward outflow valve to speed up the process, either from the pressurization panel or on the side panel by lifting the guard and turning towards open. Now the final control on the panel. The fault light illuminates for 2 seconds during its self-test when electrical power is first supplied. But it stays on if there is a malfunction in the cabin pressure controller. You should monitor auto mode and use manual mode if necessary. Let's take the pressurization system through a normal flight in auto mode. On ground, with power levers retarded, the cabin pressure controller holds the aft outflow valve open, keeping the cabin unpressurized. The aft safety valve also opens when one or both engines are at idle or the APU is running. Before takeoff, you set the destination field altitude using the landing out knob. As soon as air conditioning is switched on, the cabin pressure controller goes into pre-pressurization mode. Firstly, there's a small increase in pressure. Then, when the power levers are advanced for takeoff, the aft outflow valve modulates, and cabin pressure is set to about -400 feet. This makes the aft outflow valve sensitive to the fast pressure changes that occur immediately after takeoff and avoids pressure bumps. Depending on bleed air setting, the aft safety valve will normally be closed. After takeoff, the cabin stays at about -400 feet for a time, but if there's an aborted takeoff, the controller increases cabin altitude back to just below ground level. In flight, the controller modulates the aft outflow valve to give the cabin altitude corresponding to the current aircraft altitude. Cabin pressure is changed at a comfortable rate. This is its automatic pre-programmed pressurization schedule. During descent, cabin depressurization is controlled automatically, depending on aircraft rate of descent. Depressurization can be slow, medium, or fast. On landing, with the correct landing field elevation set on the pressurization control panel, the system will give a cabin altitude of -400 feet again, to prevent a pressure bump on touchdown. After landing, the cabin will move to landing field elevation for 1 minute, before bleeding cabin pressure to ambient by opening the aft outflow and aft safety valves.